You're listening to the Business for Good podcast, the show where you'll hear inspirational stories about companies making money by solving some of the world's most pressing problems. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and I'm glad you've joined us. Welcome, friend, to episode 163 of the Business for Good podcast. First things first, we have a new and improved website for this show. Go check it out at businessforgoodpodcast.com, where you will see not only a great new design, but you'll see all episodes, all guests listed. You can even search by topic. Did you know, for example, that we've done 4 episodes on family planning? You can even search which episodes have been listener favorites. It is a big upgrade on the website, so go check it out. And of course, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about the new site? What do you like about this show? What do you dislike? What do you wish there were more or less of? Any topics you want to hear explored in greater depth? Please let me know on the website. Now, speaking of things that we need more of, palm oil is in high demand. It's everywhere, from food to cosmetics to biofuels, but its production is a leading cause of deforestation, habitat destruction, and greenhouse gas emissions. But what if we could have all the benefits of palm oil without the downsides? Enter NoPalm Ingredients, a Dutch biotech startup using fermentation to produce a sustainable alternative to palm oil without the need for palm trees. Instead of chopping down rainforests, these guys are upcycling agricultural waste, feeding it to their specialty yeast, and then brewing a fat with the same characteristics as high-end palm oil in the process. The company has raised 6 million euros to date and has already done a trial run of its process in a massive 120,000-liter fermenter. In this episode, I'm joined by NoPalm's CEO, Lars Langhout, to talk about how microbial oils can disrupt a $60 billion industry, whether fermentation is the future of fat, and the challenges of scaling the sustainable solution. Could NoPalm Ingredients make deforestation-free oils the new norm? If they have their way, perhaps so. I'll let Lars tell you all about it. Lars, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's really great to be with you. Let me ask you, why are you doing this? What's the problem? What's the problem with me eating products that just have palm oil in them?
Well, the problem is that there's not enough palm oil. Palm oil demand grows by 4% annually, and RSPO, so certified sustainable palm oil, only is about 20% of today's supply. And it has grown by just 1% every year in the past 20 years or so. So the problem is the demand is too big to have RSPO catch up. And that's where we come in.
Okay. So the RSPO, the so-called sustainable palm oil, is that BS or is that really sustainable? Like, is this something that people should rely on? Is it better than conventional? Is it good? Like, what do you think about this certification?
Well, it's definitely better than the conventional palm oil.
What's the difference? Like, what makes RSPO different from regular palm oil?
Well, RSPO palm oil is said to not involve clearance of rainforest. There are all kinds of checks and balances in play to ensure that the smallholder farmers and the larger corporations involved adhere to the rules of RSPO.
And so when you say, Lars, no clearance of rainforest, I presume that's no new clearance, right? Because it's grown on land that at least,
Exactly.
Some point a few decades ago was cleared. But so it's no new clearance of rainforest. Okay. And so you're saying that the no new clearance palm oil is growing very slowly, while demand for palm oil is growing at 400% more what the RSPO palm oil is. And so for people who look at this and they're not convinced that biotechnology is the way to do this, and we're going to get into how you do what you're doing at NoPalm Ingredients, what do they think is the answer? Like, if it's not what you're doing, what do they think is the answer? Switching to other tropical oils?
Well, some would say switch to other tropical oils, but I think they're not aware of the footprint of other tropical oils like, coconut oil, soy oil that use more acreage per, ton of palm oil or ton of tropical oil equivalent. So that's not really the answer. And frankly, if you ask anyone in the industry, to date, there has been no real answer. And that's where we come in. That's what NoPalm brings, is a true answer to the lack of palm oil.
Great. Well, I want to get into that, but just to augment what you're saying here, right now there are many people out there who believe that they're doing something good by quote unquote boycotting palm oil, right? And instead, if a company uses coconut oil in their product, they'll purchase it. But if it uses palm oil, they don't want to use it. And in those cases, what you're saying is it's actually more intensive on the land to use coconut oil. And I looked this up before this interview. It turns out that coconut oil, to produce the same amount of oil, you would need 15 times more land of coconut oil than palm oil. In other words, if you switch from palm oil to coconut oil, you have to deforest 15 times, not 15% more, 15 times more land. And I think that's pretty shocking because palm oil has this reputation as being very unsustainable, yet actually it's dramatically more efficient and more sustainable than coconut oil.
Yeah, it is. It's the most efficient tropical oil out there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what you're doing then, because basically you're recreating an oil that is not a pure mimicry of palm oil, right? You're not making in vitro palm oil. But you're making something that is a saturated fat that you say can actually act like a palm oil. Is that an accurate assessment of what you do?
Yeah, it's a true drop-in replacement. So it has the same triglycerides. So for the audience, palm oil is made out of different triglyceride components. C16, C18, and our product is exactly the same. And it's made with microbes, with yeast, rather than with the palm fruit.
And so let's talk about that. You're saying it's made from yeast. Now, I presume the yeast itself is not in this actual product, that you're using the yeast as a carrier to express some type of fat out of the yeast, and then you separate that fat from the yeast biomass, and that fat is your product. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so what we do is we upcycle food industry waste streams, which can be anything from potato peels, rejected vegetables, dairy waste streams whatsoever. And those contain sugars, essentially. And our yeast love sugars. So what we basically do is we put the waste streams in a big fermenter, which is like a stainless steel vat, similar to brewing beer. And then we add the yeast. And the yeast start eating those sugar components in the waste streams. And within their cell bodies, because yeast are single cell organisms, they accumulate oil. And we create the environment for them to thrive so that they multiply and accumulate as much oil as possible. Then after about 48 hours, we stop that process because that's the most economical point in terms of where the growth is maximum. And after that, the rate of growth is decreasing. So we stop that process and then we extract the oils. And the oils that our yeast produce have the same fatty acid composition, as you call it, as palm oil. And we're able to do so by changing the fermentation conditions in the process. So think about pH value, temperature, etc.
I want to ask you about the potato peels. That's a pretty remarkable claim, right? Because the potato inside is a lot of simple sugars, but the potato peel is a lot tougher, right? Like the reason the potato evolved to have the peel is that it's, potato is like a big ball of sugar. It's underneath the ground where there are lots of different microbes that would love to eat sugar, but the peel prevents them from eating the sugar inside. So how have you managed to get microbes that can actually eat the peel? Do you have to hydrolyze? Is there like a hydrolysis of the peel in advance? Do you treat it in some way, or is it just pure peels?
No, in the case of potato peels, it's an enzymatic treatment.
Okay.
How we do it is something that we keep as a trade secret because it's pretty darn difficult to unlock those sugars. But that's exactly what we do. And basically, with every new feedstock, we look at how can we unlock those sugars because they're packaged differently. Right? In the potato peels, they're packaged differently than, for example, in carrots or in any other feedstock.
Does the type of potato matter? If like you're using potato peels from one strain of potato to another, is there a difference in the quality of the fermentation?
There is. There always is. There's even a seasonal difference. So we need to factor that in. So what we basically do, we do analysis of the feedstock, how it comes in. And based on that analysis and the composition, we know exactly what to do.
Okay, cool. And so just to be clear, the fermentation that you're running is you're not using any new carbon sources. You're not using, glucose. Like if you look at many other fermentation companies, they're basically buying glucose on the market and that's their sugar source. But you are running on essentially waste, right? Potato peels that might be removed, I guess, from French fries or tater tots or something else. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And so the thing is, when we started this company about 3 years ago, my co-founder, Professor Dr. Jeroen Hugenholtz, who is a professor in microbiology, and I set out to really replace or make a product that can supplement palm oil. And in order to do that, you need to do a few things. So you need to, be able to sell at the same price and be a drop-in replacement. The thing is, if you buy glucose for this process, because you're only as cheap or expensive as your raw material input, you need to get to mathematically almost impossible or very difficult levels in order to compete on price.
Right. So I did look up the price of wholesale palm oil. From what I could tell online, it looked like it was about like 50 cents per pound for wholesale palm oil. And I know you're in the Netherlands, so just imagine a little over $1 per kilo. Is that accurate? Is that what you're trying to compete with?
So that's the basically the commodity palm oil. What a lot of people don't know is that palm oil is made from the palm fruit. So what they basically do, they crush the palm fruit, then it's chemically treated to be RBD palm oil, which basically means it's tasteless, odorless, and colorless. And then it's further fractionated into liquid oleins or solid sterines or somewhat in between, semi-solid fats. And what we do is we replace those fractions. So at the moment, we can, but we are not targeting that market. We're targeting the specialty fats, specifically the mid-fraction fats and the sterines, because they sell at a higher price. So anywhere from €1.50 or $1.50 per kilo to $5 per kilo.
Okay. So more than what commodity palm oil is, what percentage of the palm oil market today is those types of more specialty palm fats that you're seeking to replace at this time? Is it 1% of the market, 10%, 50%? Like how much of the market is being sold at $1.50 per kilo?
There are different sources that claim different numbers there, but you can expect anywhere between 20 and 40% what I've seen in the market.
So if you all were to have wild success and you captured 100% of the market, you displaced 100% of the market that you're going after, you would be at maybe a fifth of the entirety of the palm oil industry globally.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now, what's really important is that a lot of people are interested in these types of uses of biotechnology to improve the sustainability of certain products. And they get something to work in the lab, and then they have a difficult time scaling it. You, on the other hand, have now run a 120,000 liter fermentation with your product, which is very abnormal, right, for a small startup to be doing. You did it via contract manufacturer. Tell us, how did that go? Did you run it on side streams? Was it on glucose? Like, how did you actually do this 120,000 liter? And did it perform above your expectations? Were there problems? Were there hiccups? What happened?
Well, there are always hiccups in these processes. But so what we set out to do, I think that journey started in May last year, where we started collaborating with two partners in order to do this, both from a CDMO side and from a supplier side.
Sure. And for those not initiated, CMO is a contract manufacturing organization.
Yeah. And so we partnered up with the supplier of these waste streams. So we didn't use glucose. This is based on waste streams. And we developed a protocol first at benchtop scale in our office in Wageningen. And then we brought it to our 400 liter pilot line. And what we basically do is ensure that the protocol that we've developed, see how it runs at the 400 liter. Then we optimized it. And then by the end of summer, we were ready to scale. So first you then do a tech transfer with this CMO company. This is a company based in Germany. Our team went there and ensured that they follow exactly the instructions that we've given them, the exact protocol or recipe, if you will, step by step on a minute.
And what was this with potato peels or some other side stream?
This was with another side stream.
And are you purposefully not disclosing what the side stream is? I couldn't tell if that was.
I'm not allowed to
Oh,
disclose.
okay, got it. I imagine 120,000 liters filled with potato peels. That is a lot of potato peels.
Yeah, I mean the volumes that we're talking about are staggering if you think from a consumer perspective. But if you see these factories from the inside, to them, those volumes mean nothing, and you'd be surprised and almost, I was daunted when I learned the volumes of waste streams produced on each of these feedstocks globally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, very helpful. Very helpful. So how did it go? You had 120,000 liters. Was it also a 48-hour fermentation? And how did the side streams go?
Yeah, so basically it's 120 cubic meter fermentation vessel that you fill. Obviously, you don't fill it to the top because their aeration is important for the yeast to thrive. So you fill it about up to 80 to 90% of that volume. And then we fermented it for a little over 48 hours. We experienced some hiccups, some foaming issues, throughput that didn't go as fast as we wanted to, at least for the first runs that we did. And then we basically harvest, as we call it. So then you have your fermentation broth. And then we have a few basically downstream processing step. So you have things like a centrifuge, basically essentially drying steps, and then extraction steps.
And were these all pieces of downstream equipment that the contract manufacturer already had, or did you have to provide some of it?
No, unfortunately, there's no company, no CMO that has all of that equipment. So we actually work with 3 CMOs on this. So we have to ship it from one location after the first drying step to the second location where we did the second drying step, and then to the third location where we did the extraction.
And so is this frozen shipment, chilled shipment? Like, how do you actually do the shipping?
For now, we did frozen shipment to ensure that there's no issues, contaminations whatsoever taking place. Ultimately, our next step as a company is also to set up a first of its kind demo factory where you do everything in one continuous production run. But simply that's not possible with CMOs, and we don't have the funding to already buy that equipment. We needed to prove that this actually works at scale, at productivity, in order to get to the next funding stage.
Yeah, very cool. So the final produce of that, I know it's 120,000 liters, and you say it's like 90%. So let's just say it's 100,000 liters of fermentation, and then you go through these drying and extraction steps. How many pounds or kilos of palm oil does that make?
So a fermentation that size produces a few thousand liters of oil.
A few thousand liters. And did you sell it? Where is that? Where are those few thousand liters of your palm oil?
So you were breaking up a bit, Paul, but I think where it went.
Yeah, right? What happened to the 3,000 liters? Where are they now?
Yeah, so we're working also with corporate partners, collaborations on the commercial side, working with them to provide them with larger batches of, like, say, 50 to 200 kilograms of oil. Because what we've learned is they've tested our smaller batches, like ranging from like 100 milliliters up to a few kilos, 10 to 20 kilos. And they do their tests on, does it actually work at lab scale, pilot scale? But for any company to really sign a commercial offtake agreement, basically essentially saying, we're going to buy this volume for this price by then, etc., they want to test it in their production lines at large scale to really see if it works in their production line. Because this is different from just switching from one palm oil supplier to another. This is a novel technology that nobody's performed before. So they want to have additional assurances. And now we've distributed those samples. They have, some of them already have, others are in the process of testing it. And we're now working with those that have tested and validated it to work towards a commercial offtake agreement.
When you say, Lars, that it's a novel fat, right? Like, so you're saying it's a drop-in, that they're not going to need to do anything special, but that it's also novel. Do you have regulatory approval to sell this, or is that something you're going to have to apply for if you haven't already?
Yeah, so it's not a novel fat; it's a novel technology that we're using. The fat in itself is a true drop-in replacement. We've even had customers saying it's actually boring to replace because they didn't have to do any reformulation, which is like the biggest compliment that you could get. But yeah, we're based in the EU, so we do have to follow a few regulatory steps. In the case where you're producing a product that's essentially the same as that's already being consumed by 1997, then you don't have to go through a novel foods approval, EFSA approval, as there is in Europe. In the Netherlands, you then have to go through CBG, which stands for the Institute for Assessing Medicine and the likes of the typical products. And we filed a dossier which basically shows that it has the same triglyceride composition, it's safe to consume. We've done all kinds of tests. In that way, we've demonstrated it. And that's now up for review. And we expect to get word back from them by May or June. So that's much faster than if you would have to file for novel foods approval in Europe.
Nice. And do you intend to file for a GRAS notice or a generally recognized as safe notice in the United States as well?
Well, it depends with all the things ongoing. JFKR Jr. just said they want to eliminate the self-GRAS loophole, as they tend to call it.
Yeah.
So we're looking at what happens because we have limited resources and we don't want to spend too much time on something that might shut the door anyways.
Presumably your dossier that you have filed in Europe, though, could be largely reproduced for the US FDA. I mean,
Exactly.
It's the same data.
Yeah, and we could use that. And essentially, our vision is that if it's approved in Europe, then approval elsewhere becomes much easier. That's how this industry also works. If you have regulatory approval in Europe, then it's easier to get it in other geographies.
Are there any advantages, Lars, to the oil that you're making? You're saying it's a drop-in. You're saying it's boring. They don't have to do anything. So the way you make it sound is that it's a biosimilar, even if not a bioidentical. But is there any advantage, or is it just the same?
Currently, it's just the same because that's what our customers really want. And as a scale-up, we need to demonstrate our credibility. Our platform, our fermentation platform, however, has the ability to make fatty acid compositions that do not exist today. But that's where we're now getting with some of our commercial partners. They are at the maturity and they know we're now credible. They know we can deliver. And now we're also talking about they ask this question, can you also do this? Can you also make that triglyceride composition? Can you have less saturated fatty acids and still have the same functionality? And the answer is mostly yes. Sometimes it might make some time and we need to do some development work on that. But that's exactly what we can do with our technology, because we can, with the same yeast and the same process, we can make solid fats and liquid oils, which have totally different fatty acid compositions. So we've already demonstrated that we can work in that bandwidth. And that is super exciting for those companies. But now the product that we're scaling is really a biosimilar or bioidentical, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So if you've succeeded at 120,000 liters, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have raised 6 million euros to date in financing. I presume in order to scale up to do as you're saying, you're going to need a lot more than that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's completely accurate. In order to do the next step, so our next step would be to set up a first of its kind demo factory, which would produce about 1.2 kilotons of oil on an annual basis, where we would demonstrate it process from A to Z and further optimize.
What's the price tag for that demonstration scale facility, and how many liters of fermentation does it have?
Yeah, so the price tag of doing that and having some runway also to execute and hire the team to do so, that renders a price tag of about 20 to 25 million euros. So same in terms of dollars at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how many liters? Like, you're going to have a fermenter of what size there?
That would be 2 fermenters of 90 cubic meters.
Okay. And for those uninitiated, 90 cubic meters is just another way of saying 90,000 liters. So in the fermentation industry, the cool people say either cubic meters, or if they are really cool, they say cubes. They'll say it's 90 cubes. But anyway, yes, for those who are not cool like myself, I say 90,000 liters. So 2 90,000 liter fermenters. Okay. And you need 20, 25 million euros in order to make that happen. That's cool. So are you fundraising now, or are you going to be fundraising? Like, how are you going to actually get this demo scale plant online?
No, we're starting fundraising in a few months. Before we do that, we want to have secured those offtake agreements to really prove the commercial traction and validation. At the same time, our business model, and we haven't touched upon that, is one of decentralization. We want to co-locate with these waste stream suppliers, actually helping them with one of their biggest issues. Because if they can't get rid of their side streams, their factories shut down, some within 48 hours, some even faster, some in a few days. But there they see an opportunity also to lower their carbon footprint as a factory unit. And we're also working with a few companies to sign basically commercial agreements for our first, second, and third co-located factory. Once we've done the demo, then we also need to think ahead, what's the next step after that?
And just to be clear, you use the term co-located factory. I presume what you're saying is after the demo plant, you want to build a full-scale plant that's adjacent to the source of your feedstock, of whether it's a potato factory or whatever it is. That's what you're looking to do?
Yes, exactly. So co-located, and then about 10 times to 15 times the size of the demo factory.
Yeah. And what do you envision that supplier as being an investor also in your technology? So let's say you're with let's say you're using potato peels, you're going to co-locate next to a big potato factory. Is that potato factory a potential investor, or do you see them merely as a feedstock supplier?
No, we see it more as a joint venture partner. So investor would imply that they would invest in the holding company, but this is more of a joint venture setup where you partner up and finance the specific factory with that partner, and then finance the next joint venture factory with another partner.
Nice. Okay. Very cool. Well, that's very exciting. I certainly hope that you all raise the capital. I hope that I get to consume your product sometime. It sounds pretty awesome. Why do you do this? Like, why are you doing this, Lars? What happened in your life where you thought, oh, I want to be able to produce palm oil inside of a bioreactor? Like, what was the actual catalyst for you to think that you're the guy to do this?
It's not really like one moment in my life that I set out to do this. So there are a few moments I can recall. So I did my MBA at Columbia Business School, and I met Irving Fain, who set up Bowery Farming. And to me, he was so inspiring to both, come up with a commercial and ideological challenge. And to me, working in consulting back then, I thought, well, this is something perfect that I could do with my skills at something similar. So that's where basically the seed was planted of doing something like this. And when COVID happened, I suddenly found myself at home rather than flying all across Europe for projects. And then I thought by myself, hey, this is the time to do something different. This is a pivotal time where I can really make a change. And really, I was fed up not having the real impact that I wanted to have. And then I ran into this article from the University of Wageningen where this naughty professor made mayonnaise with microbial oils, as we called it back then. And I was so inspired by that story that everything clicked, that I realized I was sitting at home and I thought, well, this is where I want to spend my time and money at and devote at least the better part of my career on to make this work. Because ultimately then I can say to my kids that I've left the world in a bit of a better place than I found it in.
Isn't that amazing how sometimes a singular event, like in your case, reading this article about what somebody was doing in Wageningen, has a dramatically unexpected impact on your life? Like there's so many times where like trajectories in my life were altered by something that just seems random. And I wonder if, whoever wrote that article knows the impact that article had. Like, have you reached out to the author who wrote the story and say, hey, you changed my life?
No, I haven't actually. It's actually quite fun to do. I have it framed at home because for me, it's a pretty big part in my life. The journalist who wrote that article would never imagined that their article would be framed on somebody's wall. Never in a million years. I think you should. We will link to this article in the show notes for this episode at businessforgoodpodcast.com, so more people can lay their eyes on this historic article. But I would encourage you to contact the journalist and tell him or her what an impact they had. So, yeah, that's cool. And I certainly have done that with at times where something I read really dramatically changed my life as well, even though the person probably had no intent of changing anybody's life.
life by doing it. In fact, maybe the person didn't even want to write the article. Who knows? But that's cool. All right. So we'll link to that article. But let me ask you, Lars, were there other resources that were helpful for you, whether you were, when you were at Columbia or anywhere else in your life that have been useful in the years now that you've been running this startup that you would encourage others to check out?
Yeah, definitely. I think the book that left the most profound impact on me is the Hard Thing About Hard Things from Ben Horowitz. It touches upon so many experience I'm having to go through, and I can recommend any founder or any aspiring founder to read that book and imprint it in their memory, because you can use it almost on a daily basis.
Yeah. I too have read the book and recommended it. And there's a wonderful famous line in there that I absolutely love when he says that when you start your own company, you will sleep like a baby because you're going to wake up every 2 hours and cry. And I thought, that is a very good line. I like his line a lot on that, and I've used it, attributing it to him many times. So it's a great book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which we will also link to in the show notes for this episode at businessforgoodpodcast.com. Okay, were there other resources, or is that the sole one that you're going to throw out, Lars?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, sometimes you've been using stuff for such a long time that you don't even know where you got that intel from. But one other book that I really like is Radical Candor from Kim Scott, because managing a team is something completely different in a consulting environment versus a startup environment. And I really learned that applying Radical Candor really helps, is crucial to your team development. If you are not willing to tell people the truth, if they're not performing, then you're providing them a disservice, yourself a disservice, the company a disservice, and everybody else around them as well. I'm not sure if you've read it, but that's essentially the theme there, is that as long as you're respectful, but honest and very transparent and very clear, then you're going to thrive in a business.
Good advice for a business. Would you recommend it for a relationship as well?
Ooh, I've applied some of the concepts directly.
Are you married? Are you married?
Yeah, I'm married. Yeah.
And it did not end your marriage?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's a good. There you go. Very good. Okay. Radical candor in both business and in your personal life too. I'll talk to my wife about this. We'll see what she says about this one. So I looked up the article, and I don't know how to pronounce the gentleman's name, or I don't even know if it's a gentleman, but it's Jeroen Hungoltz, Jeroen Hungoltz. I'm sure that's not how it's pronounced in Dutch, but that's the author. And so is that a male name or a female name?
Well, that's a male name. That's
okay.
Also actually my co-founder, but
that's not the article.
Also, that is attributed to, but that's not the person who wrote.
Okay. All right, got it. There is a 2020 article about making mayonnaise with microorganisms from that. Okay, got it. All right. Well, I'll make sure I get the right one in the show notes. So I'll stop looking for that right now. But that's good. I'm so glad that you corrected me on that, because I would have gotten it wrong for sure. And please apologize to your co-founder for my complete ignorance about how to pronounce his name.
He's used to it.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's okay. I recently was in Latin America where somebody referred to me as Paul instead of Paul. And I can assure you it does not bother me in any way. It's hard for me to care less, actually. I'm Paul now. That's fine. Finally, Lars, are there companies that you wish that somebody else would do? You're spending your time trying to recreate palm oil without palm trees, without having tropical deforestation. But surely, given somebody who's doing what you're doing, if you're reading these books about startups, like The Hard Thing About Hard Things, you probably thought about what other companies somebody else could do. So what do you think is missing out there? What do you wish somebody else would do? Somebody listening who's like, oh, I really admire what Lars is up to. I'd like to do something that would also leave the world in better shape for my kids. What should they do?
I think there are many variants of like palm oil without palm trees. And I'm going to cheat a little bit on this because I know somebody's working on this already, and he's in the pre-seed stage, but it's basically making wood without cutting down trees.
Oh, cool.
It's called a company called New Dawn Bio with Clement. And what they're doing is fascinating. They can basically grow wood in the shape of the application that's going to be used for, and doing it in a similar way that we do, but then more with the precision fermentation, cultivation. setup. And I think that's fascinating. And that's the beauty of the it's a bycatch of what I'm doing. So I'm suddenly submerged in this ecosystem of brilliant people. And I'm not technical from background. I have a business degree, and I meet all kinds of people who figured out a way, something very technical that I do not understand. So I get to ask all kinds of curious questions.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by what people are working on globally to make the world a better place.
That's great. Well, in my experience, the best thing that a CEO can do is to hire people who are a lot smarter than him or her and bring in a great team of people and let them do what they need to do to make the science work. So congratulations to you on appearing to have accomplished that, Lars. And I'll tell you, we had I don't know if you've heard of Lingrove, but it's a cool company we've had on the show before. They're doing basically a wood from, it's not through fermentation, but it's a wood replacement company that's pretty awesome. And we also had, interestingly, I don't know if you ever heard of Arbiom, but they're a French company using wood as a substrate for their fermentation to produce proteins. So it's a pretty riveting thing. So they're allegedly using waste from the wood pulp industry to do that. So anyway, those are two cool ideas. We'll link to those past episodes in the show notes for this episode. But for right now, Lars, I want to say thanks so much for all you're doing. It's very exciting, the idea that we could be using waste from the potato or other agricultural industries to displace palm oil and hopefully give some land back to wildlife that we've taken from them. So I'm grateful to you for all you're doing, and I will be rooting for your success.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for listening. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, please let the world know. Leave the show a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app and share the episode with your friends. Who knows? Maybe you'll inspire one of them to be in the business of doing good themselves.